It's finished at Sunderland. Manchester United have done all they can. That Rooney goal was enough for the 3 points. Manchester City are still alive here. Balotelli, Aguero!
In football, the comeback is always a big event. You can think of several comebacks just off the top of your head, where you were at the time, and who you were with. But there are always two sides to a comeback, with the dejection of the losing team being covered in a golden blanket of victory by the successors. A wise man once said,
I can't believe it. I can't believe it. Football, bloody hell.
This is Sir Alex Ferguson, someone who was regularly ice cold in his interviews.
Test my patience.
A man who was on both sides of the comeback. Seen it all, and he puts it in the most simple terms for both sides. Others have different reactions, and whether you're quietly fist pumping, crying, or running around the pitch screaming at the top of your lungs, that is what a comeback provokes inside of you. And it may seem over-exaggerated to act this way following a football match, but it is all built up based on both what happens on the pitch and off it. The build-up to a game is almost always hyped. A chance encounter in a tournament against a team from a different country spikes the interest of players and supporters alike, as narratives are created even before kickoff. But nobody can predict the events that will take place. The tension, uncertainty, and peaks of adrenaline are why we love football. And it's what makes the comeback one of the greatest aspects of our beloved sport. The nature of the comeback allows for players who would normally be banished into the backlogs of our footballing memory become staples in footballing lore. They can either be painted as the person that saved a moment, or the individual that doomed a club or nation. The mere thought of thinking back on an iconic comeback evokes strong memories to rush back to mind. Each moment, whether watched at the stadium, in a large crowd, or just at home, we can recall the magnitude of the event. But not all comebacks are constructed equally. Comebacks happen every weekend in every tier of football, so the range is extensive. The likelihood, historical impact, and the iconic moments attached to the comeback all impact their placement in history. The comeback is something that influences our beliefs, emotions, and states of mind in a unique way. The effects crawl into our communications at school and work, can lead to tormenting of rival fans and mass celebration. But the script of a comeback is always perfectly directed. The characters and scenes are always poles apart, and that's what brings us back every weekend. The Richter magnitude scale is used to categorize the strength and impact of earthquakes. For the purpose of this video, I've come up with a similar scale to classify the comebacks that have blessed our eyes throughout the years. So let's start with the most frequent of comebacks, with the smallest amount of damage caused. In order for a comeback to begin, someone must be at a disadvantage. The foundations of a comeback are built in the frustration of falling behind. These simple comebacks rarely stand out in the grand scheme of the game, and are rarely remembered as comebacks at all. More like overcoming a small deficit. These are your typical 1-0 come from behind victories that you see every weekend in your preferred league, with no real ramifications of the season, or key memorable moments. To find an example of these micro comebacks, scroll through your results app of choice to find a handful of these results, which would otherwise be swept under the carpet. The nature of these comebacks are enjoyed as the team shows some resilience to change the score into their favour, but these are so common that they are almost continual throughout history, with thousands upon thousands happening throughout every season in every footballing tier. But these comebacks are rarely remembered as comebacks at all, despite them being the most basic form of a comeback. The commonality of these comebacks only decreases as we increase the magnitude. Rival comebacks have a bit more bite to offer to fans. This is not just down to the amount of goals that are scored, but brought back to the pre-game interactions. Each game kicks off at the referee's whistle, but far before the official sets the players off, there are rivalries that have been forged by players, clubs, and fan bases. These rivalries could occur through decades of battling, or set up through a singular incident. These comebacks might not impact a season, but their damage is more localized, being remembered by both sets of fans, but still do not go too far outside of their fan bases. Beating your rivals in a comeback win can set off a streak of great form, based solely on the motivation gained from that one result. These results are glorified by fans, and you can often hear the result being recalled until the losers become the victors in their next meeting. Some of the best rivalries in football see teams play each other in the league at least twice a year, and these rivalries have been going on for years. One of the most historic rivalries in football is the Old Firm Derby, fought between Celtic and Rangers in the Scottish Premier Division. The two clubs are giants in comparison to the Davids in their league, but neither have been able to replicate their previous European success in recent history. Both Glaswegian teams have swapped dominance over the years, and no matter which team is on top, the old firm is always circled out as a date where fans and players go to war. In 2018, the March meeting saw Rangers looking to take the title race down to the wire. Twice taking the lead through Josh Windass and Daniel Gandeas, they were pinned back by the reigning Scottish champions. At Ibrox, the Hoops were punished, as a flailing elbow dismissed Siminovic as tempers began to rise. But once again, the boys proved why they were unbeaten the season prior, as Edouard rolled away in celebration, as Alfredo Morelos' shock miss condemned the fate of the Light Blues, losing out to Celtic for the title for the 7th consecutive year. The nature of these comebacks allow for fans of the clubs to swim in the victory pools until they are humbled. This is the nature of football. But there is something about snatching victory from the hands of defeat that allow late goals to mean so much more. The late goal is one that paralyzes the opposition. Scoring in the last moments of a game leaves the opposition no chance to rebuttal. They are left walking off the pitch with no way of countering. Although this level of comeback still may not directly make or break a season, there are ways that a result can propel the victors forward to achieve greater results with the momentum they build from this singular event. Defeated teams can often be seen collapsing on the floor. The late winner offers more to fans and neutrals, as it almost mirrors true cinema, with the final scene often being the most dramatic and exciting of them all. The sorrow and suffering fans face during the game as their team slumps towards the final whistle in defeat is a stark contrast to the changing tide that a late goal can do to a team. Losing 3-1 to Atletico Madrid at home would find Valencia supporters trying to catch the jump on traffic as they left the stadium. It wasn't until the 92nd minute when what seemed like a consolation goal turned out to be the start of a comeback, as another Hugo Duro goal completed Valencia's comeback from defeat 4 minutes later. In Italy, Inter Milan would find themselves losing 2-0 to Sampdoria in 2004. In the 88th minute, a consolation goal scored by Obafemi Martins would turn the game on its head. Within 4 minutes, Sampdoria would fail to keep a shutout as Christian Vieri and Recoba would peel off in celebration, as their constant pressure would lead them to an improbable comeback. Leaving it even later than Inter, Spurs found a way to keep their Champions League position goal alive. The North London team were losing after 94 minutes and 52 seconds, the latest time a team had been trailing before winning a Premier League match. A Steven Bergwijn double allowed the substitute to endure wild celebrations at the King Power Stadium from the visiting team, while the hosts were left looking for an answer to what had happened. This 360 from defeat to 3 points is the biggest turn of the tide in football, but some comebacks affect us in very different ways to others. The individual comeback provides the sport of football another cinematic event. Players are often seen just as that, football players who earn far too much money for a job that has no impact. But it's forgotten that these players have lives away from the pitch too. Players have to endure family, social and medical issues before the game, while also being in the spotlight of every media eye on the planet. When Eric Abidal was found to have a tumour in his liver and was sent to have a transplant, the football world united. With bitter rivals putting their bias aside, the unknown return of Abidal showed that even the fittest humans in the world can be marred by a devastating illness. Only 2 months after the transplant, Abidal would start for Barcelona in the 2011 Champions League final, playing all 90 minutes as Barcelona beat Manchester United 3-1. During the iconic trophy lift, Abidal was invited to lift the trophy despite not being one of Barcelona's captains. Injuries can also set players back, and one of the most infamous injuries in sport was the coming together of the boot of Stephen Hunt and the head of Peter Cech. The collision left Peter Cech not only fearing for the longevity of his career, but also his life. The impact left him with a depressed skull as he was stretchered off the pitch. Only 3 months later, now donning his iconic helmet, Cech would return to world-class form, and the longevity of his career would be out of the question as he continued to play until his late 30s, breaking the Premier League clean sheet record. But there is one more individual comeback that caught my eye, in a different way. Only moments after saying "I do" to his wife at the wedding, South African Joe Mosono was informed by his father-in-law that his team, the Orlando Pirates, were losing 2-0 to Highland Parks. He drove to the stadium and was able to join the team for the second half of the game. Assisting twice for his teammates and scoring 1 goal, Jomo's decision to rejoin the team allowed for this comeback to fall down to one individual. Despite the antics of Joe Mosono, it is hard to believe that an individual can truly influence a comeback on his own. Often, a comeback requires far greater numbers. When it comes down to it, the greatest comeback should involve the highest number of goals. Overcoming the largest gap in defeat should be represented higher in the scale, but I disagree, clearly. At times, these results do not gather all of the criteria that make a comeback have the highest amount of devastation. The embarrassment of letting a substantial lead slip against your opponent is nullified in comparison to its overall influence on the league or tournament. In its purest form, the greatest comeback of all time can be found in the match between Charlton and Huddersfield Town in 1957, as Charlton turned around a 5-1 deficit in its entirety to make the game 7-6 in the last 27 minutes. The single greatest lead blown in a game. The group stage game between Angola and Mali in the African Cup of Nations would normally fall under the radar. However, the ongoing of the game and the nature of the comeback have brought this game to light. In 2010, Angola would demolish Mali for the first 80 minutes of this football game. The 4 goals the Angolan players scored seemed to bury the hopes of Mali for the remainder of the tournament. But with a scrappy consolation goal, the team sprung into life as the leaders misplaced their dominance. 2 goals in injury time brought Mali back level as they completed a truly unlikely turnaround within 15 in-game minutes. A similar 4-goal comeback was completed by Newcastle United in 2011. Arsenal were the visiting team to St James's Park and quickly took control of the game following Theo Walcott's goal in the opening 40 seconds of the game. Quickly followed up by 3 more goals, Arsenal were up 4 goals to nothing in 26 minutes. A revitalised Magpies team returned for the second half and shocked the fans that remained hopeful in their team. Cheick Tioté finished off the comeback to pull a point for Newcastle with a weak-footed volley from outside the area. The player that passed away 6 years after this miraculous moment stamped his name on our great game forever. Recently, for only the second time in Ligue 1 history, both teams would have a player score 4 goals as Montpellier faced up to Lyon. 2 previous champions of the league find themselves hovering around the mid-table, scrapping for 3 points to push their season late on. Lyon would find the lead through Alexandre Lacazette, but Lyon would capitulate and lose all sense of footballing skill as Montpellier and El Yawahi scored 4 unanswered goals to put the visiting side in the lead. But with 35 minutes to go, Lyon would look to turn the 3-goal deficit around. Well, going into added time at 4-4, the comeback was all but completed. However, Laka had the final say. After a VAR decision awarded Lyon a penalty, Lacazette matched Wahi's poker with his own and slotted home the 100th minute penalty to seal all 3 points. One of the greatest Ligue 1 matches of the 21st century, sealed by a come-from-behind victory, ice cold from Alex Lacazette. But numerical comebacks don't just occur on the day. Sometimes they are overturned over the tail end of the season. In the Premier League, being bottom at Christmas historically means you will be relegated. But in 2005, West Brom beat the drop as they were not only bottom at Christmas, but remained bottom of the table up until half-time of the final day of the season. The Baggies completed the Great Escape as they scored 2 second-half goals, and results from Southampton, Crystal Palace and Norwich all went in the favour of Brian Robson's Midlands team. On the other end of the Premier League table, and almost 10 years prior, Newcastle United were stirred up by the comments of Alex Ferguson, who would begin his array of mind games on Newcastle coach Kevin Keegan, eventually baiting Keegan to lose his cool on Sky Sports with his historic rant.
He went down in my estimation when he said that, and he's got to go to Middlesbrough and get something. I will love it if we beat them. Love it.
United would eventually overcome a 12-point gap at the top of the Premier League, as they won 13 of their last 15 league games, including a 1-0 away win against the league leaders. Another 12-point lead was burnt away as the Galacticos, the greatest team ever assembled, lost 7 of the club's last 8 league games, as they fell to 4th and Valencia stumbled upon the La Liga title in 2004. The value of these comebacks are proven as the season comes to a close, but there is a reason that knockout football and Champions League weekdays are favoured over the constant league format. The beauty of knockout football can evoke some of the most miraculous comebacks. When knockout football is mentioned, the Champions League is the crown jewel of all club competitions. Every club strives to get there, and once they are there, the seasonal wish is to lift the trophy at the end of a challenging year against football's best. The tournament comeback summons a different feeling from the rest. Unless conducted in the final, knockout ties are completed over 2 legs, home and away, meaning that the comeback can be dreamt up over a week. And when it comes to the Champions League, recent history has not inspired one of the most historic clubs ever. Since their Champions League title in 2015, Barcelona have fallen short in every tournament thereafter, in dreadful circumstances. Their inability to hold a lead in the 2-legged ties was put on blast against Roma in 2018. After a dominant 4-1 win at the Camp Nou, It was the consolation away goal scored by Edin Dzeko that truly kept the tie hung on by a thread. In Rome, the Italians put Barcelona to the sword, continuing the Catalan club's recent misery in away knockout ties. The third and final goal of the game was scored by Kostas Manolas. As Peter Drury commented in classic style,
Roma have risen from their ruins!
the following Champions League campaign would only further destroy the spirits of Barcelona and their fans, but more on that later. While the Champions League is the crown jewel of club football, the World Cup becomes the crown. Several countries have won and lost hope on the back of a comeback, and with it only coming around every 4 years, it only allows for a small window of hope and opportunity. In '66, the legendary Eusebio would find himself and his Portugal team down 3-0 to none other than North Korea. The emblematic player would score 4 goals in the build-up to a 5-3 win, which equaled the biggest comeback in World Cup history, tied with Austria, who after 19 minutes found themselves 3-0 down in the quarter-final of the tournament. A swift reply of 5 goals in 9 minutes allowed the Austrians to get back on top in just the 34th minute. The game would end 7-5 to Austria, as they held on to their comeback to stamp their name in history in a 12-goal thriller. The miracle of Bern occurred in the World Cup final in 1954. West Germany, a team full of semi-professionals who had only completed a couple of friendlies before the tournament, would face the golden team of Hungary, a team that had gone 31 games unbeaten before the final, as well as becoming the first ever team to defeat England on home soil, before playing again in Bucharest and demolishing the English 7-1. Both teams had faced each other in the group stage early in the tournament, where Hungary's team of full-time footballers ran out 8-3 winners. So when Puskás and co went 2-0 up in the first 8 minutes of the final, another rout was expected to come. However, the following 10 minutes saw the West Germans answer back with 2 goals of their own, before an 84th minute goal from Helmut Rahn would seize the Hungarians' chances at World Cup glory, giving the West German team their first World Cup trophy. Of course, no comeback is without controversy, as the West Germans were called out for using performance-enhancing drugs. The claims were backed up as several players fell ill with jaundice, suspected to have risen from the use of contaminated needles. Nevertheless, doping was not illegal in 1954, as FIFA only began controlling doping in 1966. Back to European football, a battle between East and West Germany would see Bayer Uerdingen face the favourites Dynamo Dresden in the quarterfinals of the European Cup Winners' Cup. Dresden came out of the first leg with a 2-0 lead and were expected to progress with ease into the next tie. By half-time of the second leg, the match was all but over. A 3-1 lead in the game and a 5-1 lead on aggregate almost ensured the progression of the Eastern favourites. The second half commenced, and on the hour mark, Uerdingen pulled one back, and just like that, the wheels started falling off for Dresden. Only behind on away goals, somehow it became a matter of when, not if, Uerdingen could score another goal to seal the win. With Dresden losing all composure in the second half, the hosts would find a 6th and 7th of the night in half an hour of football to complete one of the greatest comebacks in European football. There is something sweet about watching a comeback live. When you watch a football match, you're committing at least 90 minutes of your time in hopes of seeing something special. Unlike in film, there are no reviews to look at and no way of knowing what you will see, so it's all the more sweet when the expected script does not go to plan. The underdog story is one that we can all root for. Cheering on for the lesser team is a common occurrence for neutrals, as we enjoy watching the favourites crumble under the pressure of having a great advantage. It is normally the carefree nature of the underdogs which allow us to rally behind them in these times. They begin the game with nothing to lose, and if they are to beat out their opponents, it makes for easy entertainment as the fans of the bigger teams are seen in horror as they react to the result. The 2022 World Cup was that of the underdog. The only loss of eventual champions Argentina's campaign came during their first match, as one of the tournament favourites would fall at the hands of Saudi Arabia. Inspired by Rorronoa, the king of inspiring underdogs, the Saudi team overcame a Lionel Messi penalty to cause a second half comeback upset that shook the footballing world. Japan would also set the world alight as they turned around 2 1-0 deficits against recent champions Germany and Spain in the group stage in order to seal first place in Group E. While an underdog story may require luck, some underdogs rise from the ashes to make a comeback that is sweeter than the rest. On the 13th of November 1991, Yugoslavia would beat Austria 2-0, securing first place in their qualifying group of Euro 92. However, there were unprecedented times occurring during this year. The Yugoslav War was in its infancy, as countries began to fight for their independence. As a result, Yugoslavia was banned from competing in the Euro tournament the following summer. Placing second in Yugoslavia's qualifying group, Denmark were granted permission to take the place of the war-ridden country. Coming back from the dead, Denmark would make a statement in the group qualifying, drawing against England and beating France on the final match day to qualify second behind host Sweden. Facing the Netherlands, the tournament holders, in the semi-final, the Danes would fall into extra time and score all 5 penalties in the shootout as they knocked out yet another tournament favourite. Finding themselves in the final, they would face a reformed Germany, whose star players had lifted the World Cup only 2 years ago. This time, there were no questions. Denmark won 2-0 as they backpassed their way to international glory for the first and only time in the country's history, changing the rules of the game for the rest of the time, as the back pass was removed from the game immediately after the tournament's conclusion. Winning a tournament that you did not even qualify for is not far off avoiding relegation only to win the league 12 months later, and that is exactly what Leicester did in 2016. Going into their 30th game of the 2014-15 season, Leicester had been bottom for 16 weeks and only had 19 points in total. In their next 9 games, they won 7 and ended the season in 14th position with 41 points. Nigel Pearson, the manager that saved the club from relegation, would be rewarded in the summer with a sacking. With the footballing community perplexed, the Foxes would go into the season under Claudio Ranieri, who silenced all his critics as he took his 5,000-to-1 underdogs and orchestrated the greatest underdog story in football history.
King on coronation night, nothing will stand in Leicester's way. From third tier to second, from second to first, and to the very top of the tree. A special crown, a special crowning moment.
Spearheaded by the underdog himself, Jamie Vardy led Leicester and made Premier League history by scoring in 11 consecutive games, beating Ruud van Nistelrooy's record against the Dutchman's former club. The antics of the Leicester team were ridiculous throughout the season, and them coming back from fighting relegation to toppling the monopoly of the world's richest league was a story that united the footballing world. Some comebacks just missed the mark, and this is through no fault of their own. However, the missing element means they fall short of causing the most damage possible. Despite this, they cannot be forgotten. These comebacks tinker on the fence of all the tiers. The uncertainty of where they belong, or if they even belong on a tier like this, allows for them to state their claim to be remembered. However, the fact that they are missing a special edge does remove them from falling into the final tier. For a moment of time, it appeared as though Watford had been eliminated from the highest rewarding cup competition in the world. The Championship playoffs allow teams an opportunity to win promotion to the Premier League, a magical place where heaps of cash shower you as you cross the pearly gates. With their resilience, Watford came back twice over the 2 legs to keep the game in the balance, but as Anthony Knockaert collapsed in the box in the 95th minute, it appeared Watford would lose their chance at Wembley. The subsequent 19 seconds following the penalty would send the King Power Stadium into a state of ecstasy. With Almunia's double save and Deeney's iconic finish, Watford would come back from the very brink of elimination to footballing folklore, but their subsequent defeat in the playoff final slightly taints this almost theatrically perfect moment in history. In the Champions League, there is no team like Real Madrid, the polar opposite of the underdog. The kings of Europe can't stop succeeding in the Champions League, and now have their 14th Champions League trophy after back-to-back-to-back comebacks against 3 of the biggest teams in Europe. The unlikelihood of Los Blancos progressing seemed even more unfathomable each game. Their comebacks were jaw-dropping and groundbreaking on their own. To beat the holders of the Champions League, alongside the 2 biggest spenders in football history, all in comeback wins, is phenomenal. To go on and win the tournament again was the cherry on top of the icing on top of the cake. This run secured Karim Benzema's Ballon d'Or and allowed for Madrid's bid for the greatest midfield trio of all time to gather their 4th Champions League trophy together. Madrid proved that they could not falter on the European stage and would take astronomical achievements for one club to surpass their dominance. Only a comeback in the final would have made this collective season of comebacks a purely perfect group of moments, but maybe the recency can't take them into the next tier. Barcelona have also staked their claim for one of the most memorable comebacks of all time. After a 4-0 thrashing at the Parc des Princes at the hands of PSG, the Catalan club were left to do it all at home in 2017. At the Camp Nou, despite the heavy defeat a week prior, the masses drew in as 96,000 fans wanted to see what could happen in Barcelona. Immediately, the fabled front 3 of Barca were seen as Luis Suarez smuggled the ball in somehow in the opening 3 minutes of the game. An own goal by Kazawa brought hopes to the eyes of the massed crowd, and an early second half penalty slammed in by Lionel Messi meant that Barcelona needed to find one more goal to equal their opponents. But as they progressed and hurled the cavalry forward, Edison Cavani was allowed to slam in an away goal that meant Barcelona required 3 more to win the tie. As Barcelona continued to throw bodies forward, Cavani and Di Maria had opportunities to silence the crowd with one-on-one attempts, but they could not convert. It was at this point that a certain individual decided to take it upon themselves to change it all. Neymar's thunderous free kick was followed up by a controversial penalty awarded to Barca. With Messi already scoring one earlier in the game, Neymar stepped up and slotted it home in the 91st minute, leaving Barcelona only one more goal to be scored in added time. With 30 seconds remaining, and Neymar on what seems to be the final free kick of the game, he lifted the ball towards the goalkeeper Ter Stegen, and it was cleared. Neymar slowed it all down. Feinting across with his right foot to dip onto his weaker left foot, he placed the ball into the Barca boy. The match was covered in controversy over the referee's decisions, and some believe it was this performance from Neymar which enticed PSG to break the transfer record on the winger. But as we have already learned, Barca's glory was only short-lived, as they would soon experience a downward spiral like no other. As the draw was made for the final knockout stages in 2019, football fans salivated over the prospect of the semi-final including Barcelona and Liverpool. Both teams were playing outstanding football, impressing in the tournament and their domestic leagues. Lionel Messi was the top scorer in the Champions League, and Virgil van Dijk had been hailed throughout the previous 2 years as the greatest defender in the world. Their imminent battle on the pitch was a sight worth watching in itself. The first leg at the Camp Nou ended 3-0, but it was not to the excellence of Barca or the disarray of Liverpool. The match was evenly contested throughout. A defining moment was this chance in the final seconds of the game. To put the tie to bed, the great Lionel Messi set up Ousmane Dembele for the 4th goal, only for the Frenchman to fluff his chances. Liverpool manager Jurgen Klopp praised his players post-match, as they would have to wait a week to hope for an alternate ending. Going into the game, 2 of the front 3 that had helped Liverpool arrive to this stage and maintain a title challenge in the Premier League were ruled out through injury. Nevertheless, an early goal from Divock Origi ensured that Liverpool broke the seal within the first 10 minutes of the tie, as they needed 4 goals to brush by Barcelona. The Catalans were not without their fair share of chances, but could not penetrate at either end of the pitch. A half-time substitution saw Gini Wijnaldum enter the pitch in place of left-back Andy Robertson, an attacking change that was immediately rewarded.
It's on its way into the middle, so it's Wijnaldum! Oh, it's in! Wijnaldum! Oh, it's 3!
Wijnaldum found the net twice within 11 minutes of being on the pitch, putting Liverpool level in the tie. Barring any late drama, Liverpool would take the Spanish champions to extra time and penalties. Well,
Liverpool 3-0. Corner taken quickly, Origi! Oh my word!
truly special and unforgettable evening for the Liverpool fans made all the sweeter as they beat out Philippe Coutinho, a player who left Liverpool for Barcelona to win the Champions League. Liverpool would go on to win their 6th Champions League in the final against Tottenham Hotspur, who also conducted a miraculous comeback to reach their first ever European final. A Lucas Moura hat-trick sealed in the 96th minute saw Spurs turn around a 3-goal deficit in the second leg. But with the 4 goals scored in Anfield, Liverpool fans were joyous, and while most clubs would say they have not experienced something like that in their lifetime, some fans are more fortunate than others. An iconic comeback is the perfect marriage of all previous tiers. The rewatchability itself allows for everyone to appreciate the pure cinema that is drawn up by everyone involved. Stakes are high, and the room for error is minute. As the unimaginable folds before you, there is no greater moment in sports. In 2005, an unbelievable underdog's comeback would set the footballing world on fire. The discrepancy between the starting 11s of both finalists of that season's edition of the Champions League would have made for an unbelievable story to begin with. The recognition of the names of the Milan team even today are that of players of significant achievement in football. Having previously won the tournament 2 years prior, the Italian giants had already tasted the sweet victory of the tournament, and captain Paolo Maldini led them out with 4 Champions League wins already under his belt. Liverpool arrived in Turkey having beaten out several favourites already, but this Goliath seemed to have defeated their David before the referee would even whistle for half-time. Immediately down 1-0, before the Liverpool players could even realise the game had begun, 2 Hernan Crespo goals before the half would certainly destroy all hopes for the Reds. Mission Impossible was set, and the Liverpool team returned to Istanbul in hopes for a miracle, and a miracle they found. This was a true spectacle, and if you watched it live, you surely remember where you were. The miracle comeback had been achieved. However, there was still injury time to go. This is where the miracle truly took place, inking the name of Jerzy Dudek onto the minds of every football fan for eternity. The double save of Andriy Shevchenko in the 117th minute was voted as the greatest Champions League moment of all time, and Dudek's subsequent heroics in the shootout ensured that the Pole would never be forgotten. This sort of comeback epitomizes everything that is loved about the game. The glory of lifting a trophy following an event of this nature only heightens the feelings we get when we look back. But snatching victory from the claws of defeat was achieved in the truest respects in 1998, in the home of Barcelona, by Liverpool's most hated rivals, Manchester United. In a game where anything can happen, United were already at a disadvantage, as the midfield duo of Paul Scholes and Roy Keane were unavailable for selection due to suspension, and with Bayern scoring from a free kick inside 6 minutes, United would have to crawl back in some style. The game went on, and Bayern dominated. By half-time, they could have been leading by 3 goals with the chances they created. Into the second half, United would still not create much, as Bayern would strike the woodwork twice, but remain comfortable in the game. As the fourth official raised the board, signalling 3 added minutes, United were awarded a corner. Goalkeeper Peter Schmeichel would arrive for the corner in a last-ditch attempt to salvage the game. The ball would eventually fall to the feet of Teddy Sheringham, clawing a goal back for the Red Devils. Before this goal, Man United had been trailing for 85 minutes in the Champions League final. With Bayern being moments away from glory, the team were shell-shocked, as United players and fans spiraled into celebration. With a restart, both teams now look forward to another grueling 30 minutes of football, or so they thought.
Beckham to swing this one in again. Sheringham wins it, Solskjaer with the goal for Manchester United.
With that kick, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer became the ultimate super sub, and with that goal, Manchester United claimed the game, the trophy, and the treble. A historic season for the club, as Alex Ferguson claimed his first European title. And as footballing comebacks go, there is no better place to look than Sir Alex Ferguson's noisy neighbours. The year is 2012, and Manchester City are 3 years removed from their Abu Dhabi takeover, which have seen them rise as one of the best teams in the country. City are level on points with United, and have a favourable goal difference going into the final day. This means that in order for the Sky Blues to win their first ever Premier League title, they must beat a Queen's Park Rangers team who have been struggling this season, and are fighting relegation on the final day. With both teams desperate to pick up something at the Etihad, the stage was set, and according to the expected script, City dominated the West London club, and 5 minutes from half-time, an unlikely source for the goal arrived, as Pablo Zabaleta's deflected shot found its way into Paddy Kenny's net. City were ahead, and QPR had to put a shift in if they were to have a say in their survival in the league. As the second half began, there was a twist in the tale. An error from Julian Lescott slipped Djibril Cissé in behind the City defence, bringing both clubs back to level terms. But a reliable player came to the forefront of this big game. Joey Barton was caught elbowing Carlos Tevez on the edge of the box, and found himself receiving a red card for his actions, punishing his team when they needed all the numbers they could to hold on to this potential season-defying result. For City, this added more encouragement as they chased another goal, but continued to fall short. With the knowledge of United's current 1-0 win over Sunderland, the citizens knew they had to score again. After an unbelievable point-blank stop from QPR's number 1, Jamie Mackie scored for the visitors, leaving QPR safe from relegation, and City 3 points and 2 goals away from their first title. To say QPR endured an onslaught of pressure is an understatement. City threw the kitchen sink at them, as the visitors made save after save, block after block. As the fourth official signalled for 5 added minutes, the visuals of the home fans painted the canvas. Still requiring 2 goals in 4 minutes, City were awarded another corner, their 19th of the game. Up leapt Edin Dzeko, as the QPR goal was finally penetrated once more. With City on the ball once again, the news came in that Manchester United had secured the win. Those watching on Sky Sports would see the split screen of the United players waiting to hear the end result of the game in Manchester. The pressure continued as the City players looked to rewrite history forever. Still holding their own with a man less, QPR would have to endure another minute and a half of play to keep City at bay. As Sergio Aguero picked up the ball on the half-turn, it turned the heads of the footballing world. The goal sealed City's first title in 45 years, and the first Premier League trophy. Despite what you think of the growth of football in the blue side of Manchester, the comeback from defeat puts together the beauty of snatching victory from the claws of defeat. City became the only team in the history of the league to win on goal difference, and the late Aguero goal left the comeback king Sir Alex to regroup his disheartened men, who were convinced they would win it all. Despite losing, other results fell in favour of QPR, so they survived relegation and both teams could celebrate on the pitch. Accompanied by the commentary from Martin Tyler, the most iconic goal in football's history was born, giving hope that anything is possible in football, no matter the time we have remaining.